After we hadn't seen Kevin Durant play for over a year, he is finally back playing. What is significant though isn't actually that Kevin Durant is back playing, but at the level that he is playing at. After tearing his right Achilles, most fans thought that Kevin Durant would never return to his previous level, as an Achilles tear can be a career-ending injury for a lot of NBA players. DeMarcus Cousins was once one of the best centers in the NBA and was one of the most exciting players to watch and made the Pelicans a really fun team. But after he had an Achilles injury, he isn't even close to being his former self. But Kevin Durant is just simply built different. He's come back from one of the worst injuries known to basketball and he's somehow got better. He's averaging 29, 7 and 5 with the best 3-point percentage of his career and the best true shooting percentage of his career. And even when you just watch him play, you'd never think that 2 years ago his Achilles tendon was torn in half. But now let's actually go more in depth on KD and actually talk about his game. Even in his first game back, you could tell that he was going to be okay. He wasn't slow and clunky, he wasn't moving around gingerly, but rather his first step was explosive and his agility was still all there. And as soon as he threw down that first dunk, it felt like the KD that we all knew and loved was back. With KD now playing with both James Harden and Kyrie Irving, his role has certainly changed, but remember that KD is no stranger to playing with other stars and has virtually played his entire career with other superstars. On the Thunder he played with Russell Westbrook and James Harden before he was a superstar. Then on the Warriors he was part of their infamous super team with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. And now on the Nets he's with James Harden and Kyrie Irving. What this has forced KD to do though is get used to playing with other stars, and KD plays excellently with other elite players. Before we actually saw Harden, KD and Kyrie play together though, a big question was who's going to handle the ball and who's going to take less shots. And I believe that Kyrie is the weakest player of the three, so I thought he should have the biggest decrease in number of shots. But Kyrie is actually taking the most shots out of anyone and he's taking over 20 a game. Then KD is the second most with almost 19 a game, which is actually more than all of his years on the Golden State Warriors. And surprisingly to me, it's been James Harden that's taken the biggest decrease in shots, going from 22 a game last year to just 16 now. But he's averaging a career high in assists and almost a career high in rebounds, the best 3-point percentage of his career and the best true shooting percentage of his career. And now this is a bit off topic, but James Harden 100% deserved to be an all-star starter over both Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving. Just because he's averaging 10 less points a game than last year doesn't mean he's got any worse, as he's taking a lot less shots like I said, and he's still great on the offensive end. And if anything, James Harden has got better, because this just shows his ability to adapt to playing with other stars, which is what a lot of fans thought he couldn't do. And what this shows about the Brooklyn Nets as a whole is they are really learning to play together as a team, and this is really good sign for them, but a bad sign for any team that has to face them. But back to Kevin Durant, in terms of specifically his MVP race, playing with Kyrie and Harden could hinder his chances. Because if you took KD off the Nets, they would still be a strong team, and I predict that they'd finish at least top 4 in the East easily. With that being said though, I do think that KD is the most important and most valuable player, specifically to the Nets. Because he's undoubtedly the best player on the Nets, and I think he's the player who really brings a group together, although it is quite hard for me to make that assumption. As of right now, KD is actually out injured though with a pulled hamstring, and he has no fixed timetable for when he'll return. So these next few weeks could be the biggest determining factor on whether KD is MVP. Because if the Nets start to lose games and don't look as strong without KD, then that really strengthens his narrative. But then on the other hand, the Nets could continue dominating and possibly rise to number 1 seed. Now so far without KD, the Nets are 9-5, which is a solid record and virtually on par with their win percentage for the rest of the season. And they've had some big wins too against the Lakers, Clippers and the Phoenix Suns, all elite teams in the West. And the Brooklyn Nets are currently on a 7-game win streak in which Kevin Durant only played in 1 game, and they have beaten the Lakers, Clippers and the Suns in this 7-game stretch. So unfortunately for Kevin Durant, because of all of this information here, I don't think he'll win MVP. And now that's certainly not a surprising thing to say, but Kevin Durant is still one of the top 3 players in the league, so he'll always have a chance at MVP nonetheless. And then if I had to predict where Kevin Durant would finish in MVP voting right now, I would say right at the 5th seed. He could well finish higher if the Nets start to fall off without him, but from what we've seen so far, I think that's quite unlikely. What is scary to think though is that if the Nets can beat the Lakers and the Clippers without Kevin Durant, then imagine how good they'll be with him. Now the Lakers didn't actually have Anthony Davis for this game, but that's still a big win for the Nets nonetheless. And I personally do still have the Lakers as my favourite for the title, but a series between them and the Nets could be really close. And at this point in time, I do think it's most likely that those two teams will face off in the finals, so who do you think is better out of the Lakers and the Nets, and who do you think will win the title? And then of course, what do you actually think about Kevin Durant possibly winning MVP too? If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, first of all, thank you so much for watching, it really does mean a lot to me, and if you could like the video as well, that really does help me out. And now I do actually only have 2 players left this series, which is Steph Curry and LeBron James, so I'm going to cover Steph Curry next. And so hopefully I'll see you on that next video.